What's happening, everybody? It's John Pollock, and this is Fight News Now. We're going to be joined by John Ramdeen and Robin Black to talk all of today's news, including the possibility that Anderson Silva could be fighting at UFC 198. We will also be discussing another possible fight that could be coming your way at UFC 200. We'll also hear from heavyweight Frank Mir as he prepares for Mark Hunt this Saturday in Brisbane, Australia, and a whole look at that card coming your way on today's edition of Fight News Now. I am joined by Robin Black and John Ramdeen to go through all of today's news. And man, I guess that the UFC was watching us the other day discussing the addition of one Corey Anderson to the UFC 198 card. Well, they're going a step further now. SureDog is reporting that they are targeting an Anderson Silva fight. And of all people, Uriah Hall would be his prospective opponent for March the 14th. I mean, it makes a lot of sense given the big soccer stadium that they are running. It'd be great to have Anderson Silva on that card.
Right?
And this is, yes, in Curitiba, Brazil. I mean, all this makes all the sense in the world if you're the UFC. Are you surprised at all Anderson Silva would be fighting so quickly after his loss to Michael Bisping?
I'm not surprised, especially given that it is Curitiba, Brazil. This is the home of the Shoot a Box Academy that Anderson Silva, Ninja, Vanderlei, Shogun, Pele, all that great Brazilian team, they were part of this city, and they made it a fighting community. So I'm not surprised that Anderson Silva would want to be a part of this show, considering how big this show is going to be.
You know, this is a very interesting matchup in a number of ways, not the least of which, when Uriah Hall came to the UFC after that reality show, he just had a real hard time pulling the trigger. And that sort of block, it's not that different from writer's block. It's a physical version of writer's block. He just can't get it going. Anderson showed that against Diaz, and he showed that against in his last fight against Michael Bisping. Whereas this guy has now become able to go in and freely express himself. You see what happens when he gets over that fighter's block, I guess we can call it. Like, look at the stuff this guy is doing. And doesn't this look like Anderson Silva kind of earlier in his career? Free expression, free martial arts. That's what Uriah Hall has become now. Anderson Silva has kind of developed that fighter's block in his last couple of outings later in his career. So he's going to have to get past that because this monster is coming for him.
I think as well with Anderson Silva, I mean, this guy is always going to see these highlights. And as this guy wants to continue his career, whether it's fair or unfair, he's always going to be measured against his past successes of anyone looking for anything of a decline for Anderson Silva. I don't know if that's necessarily fair, but that's what's going to happen here with Anderson Silva. He is expected that you have to run through a Uriah Hall to justify your position in the middleweight division.
True, but one thing we know about Anderson Silva is he surrounds himself with the people that he wants to surround himself with, including his manager, Ed Suarez, who is a giant in the mixed martial arts industry. On top of that, all of his friends are legends of the game. They understand at this point, you don't have to worry about anything but training. Go in there, do the things that you love inside of the cage, and do not worry about the fans. Don't worry about the promotion. Go in and fight for the love of mixed martial arts. Anderson Silva has made a boatload of money. He is a legend in the sport. He's going to go down as one of the greatest fighters to ever step foot inside of the cage. He's been all over the world fighting. I think he just has to remember how much he loves this sport and go and do it for that reason.
Bang on, because all those highlights we just saw, all of that stuff he was doing it in the spirit of play. He wasn't going in there feeling some necessity to win or feeling some necessity about money or legacy or judgment or anything. He was going in and playing fighting, and he loves to play fighting. And if he can do that against Uriah Hall, we're going to have an insane fight. Just nuts. If he can go in there and freely express himself, an older version and a younger version of elite free-flowing martial artists, we got us a killer
fight. What is that balance? What is that balance? Because we know what Uriah Hall is capable of. So explosive. Gegard Mousasi asleep for 1 second. Well, he was asleep for a couple of seconds because he was asleep for 1 second. And we know that Hall is capable of doing the things that he can. He can knock you out in 1 second. And we know Anderson Silva in his younger days was capable of that. We saw the more mature Anderson Silva against Michael Bisping. Is there a balance? Is there something in between that we have not seen yet from Anderson Silva.
Yes, and you're right, we haven't seen it yet. So far, we've seen brilliant Anderson Silva, which we saw a lot of as a UFC champion. Then we've seen the new Anderson Silva who hasn't pulled the trigger. There's something else, and that is a mature Anderson Silva that everything he's experienced, everything he's built, all the skills he has, he can just go in there and work them. Not tense, not feelings of expectation, just go in there and fight. Should he be as free-flowing as far as how he uses his tools as Uriah Hall? Maybe not, but he should be free-flowing in the way he expresses himself.
This is shaping up to be an extremely deep card at UFC 198. Might get even deeper because another note from UFC tonight was the fact that they are now looking at the idea of adding Cris Cyborg Justino to this card. John, you have talked about this during her entire tenure in Invicta. She's under a Zuffa deal. Why is she fighting on a platform where less people are seeing her? Put her on the big card, even if you don't have a women's 145-pound division.
I agree 100%. I think that if you can find, when you look at the women's 135-pound division and 115 right now, they're just trying to figure things out. Why not do the same thing with Cyborg? She's been getting fights in Invicta and in Strikeforce, so you just give her fights. It's like, well, we don't have a division. Does that really matter? This is the girl that you want to promote. You're her promoter. Let her be a star. I think when fans see Cyborg's highlights, they're going to want to see her. And then there'll be all the, well, is she going to fight Holly Holm? Is she going to fight Miesha Tate? Who cares? Just allow that interest to be created. When people watch Cyborg do this, they are going to be fans. And when fans are exposed to her, the casual fans, this mainstream audience, which is the biggest audience in mixed martial arts, I think this is one girl that a lot of people will gravitate towards.
Yeah, and the reason I think this didn't happen is the UFC really, really, really wanted her to compete at 135 where all their stars are. Instead of like, well, we got this one star and we'll feed her 145 pounders to destroy. We'll put her in there where there's Miesha Tate and all these elite fighters. So we would see this great fighter in a division of great fighters. She could make 135. The idea that any human being cannot lose 10 pounds of muscle, absolutely. Would she be the same fighter? No, she'd be a 135-pound version. Either she wouldn't, in which case looks like she may get her wish, which is good for her, or she really believes she could, in which case she was wrong, she could, or just didn't want to. In any event, they're looking and eventually like, is she really not going to go down to 35? I mean, we've tried to force her, we've told her, we've yelled at her, we've threatened her, she won't do it. Oh, damn it, we better make her a fight at 145. So good for her. Good for you, Cris Cyborg.
It goes against the philosophy the UFC has always had, and that is that when we put two fighters together and we'll go with the results. If this person wins, great. If this person wins, great. We have our options regardless. In this case, there's only so many women at 135 that you put against her at 145. Cyborg starts knocking off these people. What is the end goal with Cyborg? Is she just going to fight without a division around her? And you're also eliminating people at 135 in a weird way.
They got to bring in a 45er, and that's ultimately why they've been so adamant. Yes, it will be really cool to see Cyborg perform, but in the world, there is a lot of really good 135ers. There's a lot of really good 125ers. There's a lot of really good 115s, and there's nobody who can really compete with her. So you get to see her do awesome things, but there's nobody else. There's no close second. There's her and there's everyone else.
I think the philosophy is also changing because you see the stuff that Bellator is doing. I think over the last, say, 5 years, I think when MMA exploded and everybody thought the sport was the ultimate fighting championship, it was all about competition. It was the best. Who is the best at 170 pounds? George St. Pierre. Who is the best at Anderson Silva? And you see everybody underneath that climbing the ranks to get to the championship. We're seeing that that's not necessarily the case right now. It is all about entertainment. We see athletes like Sage Northcutt and Paige Van Zandt, and of course the idea of signing CM Punk to the UFC. They understand that, yes, we're still going to promote the fact that we have the best fighters in the world and the championships matter, but this is also entertainment, so we're going to take, some of the ideas from the Bellator organization and just try to entertain people. And Cyborg's one of those athletes that can entertain. She's fighting in Invicta, so she's getting those fights. Just have her fight those same girls under the UFC banner, I think it makes a lot of
And
sense.
it's possible, given how deep this card is. I mean, Cyborg could end up on the Fight Pass
Sure.
portion.
Why
There's
not?
going to be something.
Yeah.
You look at that card, if they add Anderson Silva and Cyborg,
Yeah.
something big is going to be on Fight Pass.
Exactly.
They want that now.
Yeah, they want that.
I mean, this is the future of how people they want or consider people might consume the UFC. So you got to.
And they might already understand that, considering Invicta is on Fight Pass. So if people that have tuned into her fights, well, we're now just going to watch her on the UFC broadcast instead of Invicta.
But when you think about it, it's an interesting when you mention CM Punk. She's sort of the opposite
Yeah.
problem. Now, when you say somebody is absolutely the best and there's nobody who can compete with her, if that person starts believing that, their skills may degrade. They may not have the same focus. If you think you're the best in the world, you don't train like you're the best in the world. So sometimes that can happen, and before you know it, there is somebody. But her problem is she's too good. CM Punk's problem is he's too bad to fit in the UFC under the model, so they changed the model.
Okay, let's quickly discuss another hypothetical. Lots of targeting and shooting
Babies.
fours. Cain Velasquez, Travis Brown,
Love it.
that one was dropped on UFC tonight. Not confirmed for UFC 200, but that
Still love it.
is a direction that makes a lot of sense, and I've been saying it. I think Cain Velasquez is due for a 3-round, non-title fight, get back into the swing of things rather than going into another 5-round training camp, because it's a big difference.
Sure, you're almost fighting 2 fights, but either way, Travis Brown is going to be a handful for anybody. I mean, Cain Velasquez, we all believe he's one of the best heavyweights, maybe the top 2 heavyweights of the last 5 years. But Travis Brown, he can do some damage.
When Cain just looks at you like you're meat,
Yeah,
when he's just so, and he's got that mindset, that guy's
Terrifying.
It's terrifying.
And finally, Justin Gaethje, 1 day later, the Colorado Commission has lifted his
That's great
his
news.
big suspension. So
That's-
backflips, gets a little slap on
Maybe
the
he's
wrist,
doing
and
a
that's it.
backflip over that.
All right, prelims this Saturday night, 8 Eastern, here in Canada on Fight Network. We have 4 fights coming your way from Brisbane, Australia. I'm being told to shut up.